She posted screenshots calling me toxic and controlling triangular flag to gain sympathy after our breakup. I didn't defend myself or respond. Months later, the truth came out publicly and her own followers turned against her in the comments section. "You need to grow up and stop being so insecure." She said that to me while she was still logged into my laptop. Not hers. Mine. I'd walked in from the kitchen, mug in hand, completely unprepared for what I was looking at. She had my email open. Not just glanced at, actually scrolling. Slowly. Like she was reading every single thread with purpose. I stood there for a second, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the back of her head while she sat at my desk like she belonged there. Like this was completely ordinary behavior. And then she felt me standing there. She turned around, saw my face, and before I could say a single word, she said it. "You need to grow up and stop being so insecure." No apology. No embarrassment. Not even a blink. Just that sentence, delivered flatly, like I was the one who'd done something wrong by walking into my own room. I didn't say anything back. I just stood there holding that mug, steam rising from the coffee I suddenly didn't want, staring at a woman I thought I knew completely. And she turned back around. Like the conversation was over. Like she'd won. I didn't realize it then. But that moment, that exact, quiet, stomach-dropping moment, changed everything. Because 6 months later, she would be posting cropped screenshots online calling me the abusive one, the toxic one, the controlling one with the red flags. And every single person in our social circle would believe her. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. Not through a friend. Not through a comment. Not through a single word typed into any box anywhere online. I went completely silent. And it cost me. For a while, it cost me a lot. Friends stopped texting. Mutual acquaintances started following her instead of both of us. People who'd eaten dinner at my apartment were suddenly liking her posts with fire emojis and leaving comments like, "You deserve so much better," and his loss. I watched all of it happen in real time, and I said nothing. Because I knew something they didn't. And I knew the truth has a way of surfacing on its own. You just have to be patient enough not to drown before it does. This is the story of what really happened. And what happened after. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We were both 26 when we got together. She was a content creator, not massive, but growing, maybe 40,000 followers at the time we met. I was in marketing, which she loved to mention whenever her brand deals came up, like I was a useful accessory to her career. We met through mutual friends at a rooftop event, dated casually for 2 months, then locked it in. That's it. That's all the background you need. What matters is everything that came after. The first year was good. I want to be honest about that, because I'm not here to rewrite history and make it seem like everything was always broken. We traveled. We laughed. We had the kind of easy, warm companionship that makes you think, this is the person. This is the one. She was funny in a razor-sharp way that made dinners with friends genuinely entertaining. She was thoughtful when it mattered. She remembered small things I mentioned once in passing and brought them back weeks later. She made me feel seen. That's the part nobody talks about when relationships go bad. The version of that person that made you fall for them in the first place. Because that version was real. Or at least it felt real. And maybe it was, for a while. But somewhere between month 8 and month 14, something shifted. I couldn't name it at first. It was subtle, the way these things always are. A comment here. A reaction there. Small moments that you file away under "bad day," or "she didn't mean it like that," without ever looking at the file again. Until the file gets too full to ignore. The first time she went through my phone, I caught it by accident. We were sitting on the couch watching something, and I'd left my phone on the coffee table face up. A message notification came in from a colleague named Brooke. We were working on a pitch together, and she was updating me on a client meeting. Nothing extraordinary. Just work. But I felt the couch shift. I looked over. She had already picked up my phone. She was reading the message. And I don't mean she glanced at it the way you might glance at something that lights up next to you. She was holding it, angled away from me, reading. I said, "Hey, that's my phone." She put it down immediately, gave me this small, tight smile, and said, "I know. Sorry. Just curious." And went back to watching the show. Just curious. I remember sitting there thinking, should I make more of this? Is this a big deal? I decided it wasn't. I decided I was being too uptight. She was my girlfriend. I wasn't hiding anything. What was the harm? That was mistake number 1. Not because I should have assumed the worst, but because I never once considered that she might. Her content was doing well by then. She'd grown to about 70,000 followers and brand partnerships were coming in more regularly. I was genuinely proud of her. I told her that. I made myself useful, helped her think through pitches, gave feedback on captions, sat off camera during shoots when she needed someone to talk to between takes. I was in her corner. Completely. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing that she wasn't really in mine. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Like the way she'd talk over me at dinner when I was mid-sentence. Like the way she'd dismiss my frustrations as overreactions. "You're so sensitive," said with a laugh that was supposed to make it feel like a joke. Like the way she'd bring up my past mistakes and arguments that had nothing to do with them. Her memory for my failures was photographic. Her memory for her own was non-existent. I didn't have language for it then. I just knew that I was starting to feel smaller in my own relationship. Starting to feel like I was always the one apologizing, always the one recalibrating, always the one doing the emotional maintenance while she ran the emotional show. But I loved her. So I kept adjusting. I kept shrinking. I kept telling myself this was just a rough patch. Then came the laptop incident. The one I told you about at the beginning. To understand how that felt, you need to understand that I'd had my email breached a year earlier. A phishing scam that cost me a client relationship and 3 months of painful reputation repair. My email inbox wasn't just personal space. It was professional armor. Sensitive correspondence. Client details. NDAs. So finding her scrolling through it, calmly, without asking, without permission, wasn't just a privacy violation between two people in a relationship. It was a fundamental breach of trust. And when I tried to explain that later that night, after the shock wore off and I found words, she turned it around completely. "I only did it because you've been distant lately. If you weren't hiding things, this wouldn't bother you. I think your reaction is telling." I remember staring at her, genuinely disoriented. We'd gone from her invading my privacy to me being the suspicious one. I remember thinking, how did we get here? How did I end up on the defensive? I apologized. I actually apologized. For being bothered. That's the part that makes me cringe now. Not the anger. The apology. Because it tells you exactly where my head was at that point in the relationship. Things didn't get better after that. They got worse. Just slowly enough that you could almost pretend they weren't. She started making comments about my friendships. Subtle ones at first. "You talk to Owen a lot. You always seem more relaxed around Nate than you are around me. I just feel like your friends come first sometimes." I tried to reassure her. Started checking in more. Started declining plans here and there. Not because she ever directly told me to. She never made a single outright demand. It was all framed as feelings. As insecurities. As things she needed from me emotionally. And because I cared about her and didn't want her to feel that way, I responded. I adjusted. I pulled back from the people I cared about to invest more time into a relationship that was quietly consuming everything. Looking back now, I can see exactly what was happening. But living inside it, you don't see it. You just feel vaguely tired all the time and wonder why. There was a period in month 17 where I started journaling. Not for any grand reason. I'd done it on and off since college. But it became a way to process things I couldn't say out loud without starting an argument. Things like, "I don't feel like myself anymore." Things like, "I said sorry 3 times today, and I'm not sure what any of them were for." Things like, "I caught her checking my location history on my phone, and she said it was an accident." I still have those journals. I'll come back to that. Month 19. She asked me to unfollow a girl I'd gone to university with. Let me be clear, this was someone I hadn't seen in person in 2 years. Someone I followed out of pure social habit. We didn't message. We didn't comment on each other's content. We just existed in each other's peripheral digital vision the way everyone does. But she brought it up 3 times in 1 week. And on the 3rd time, I said no. Not aggressively. Not cruelly. Just no. I'm not doing that. You'd have thought I'd told her something terrible. Her eyes went cold in a way I'd only seen once before, during a fight about something I've long since forgotten. "Fine," she said. "That tells me everything I need to know." And she went to bed. The conversation was never revisited. But it wasn't forgotten. I could feel it sitting there between us. This unresolved thing she'd logged away for future use. That was the beginning of the end, really. Even if the actual end took another 5 months to arrive. Month 22. I came home from a work trip. 4 days in another city, important client, genuinely exhausting. I'd called her every evening, texted throughout the day, done everything right. But when I walked through the door, she barely looked up from her laptop. I sat next to her, tried to tell her about the trip, and she gave me one-word responses. Eventually I asked what was wrong. She said, "Nothing." The way people say nothing when they mean everything. I tried again an hour later. Same answer. By the next morning, she was warm again. Completely, suddenly, as if whatever had been wrong simply ceased to exist. I asked her again. She said she'd just been in a mood. That was it. No explanation. No conversation. Nothing to anchor the experience to. I let it go. But something in me had started paying attention in a different way. Less hoping. More watching. The breakup didn't happen in one dramatic moment. I wish I could tell you it did. A big scene. A clear moment where you could point and say, "There, that's the line." It was more like a slow exhaust. I sat across from her at dinner, a place we'd been to on our second date, back when everything still felt easy, and I looked at her talking about her upcoming content schedule, and I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Not love. Nothing. And I knew that kind of nothing is its own answer. I told her I needed to talk. She put her fork down, and the conversation that followed was remarkably quiet for what it was. I told her I'd been unhappy for a long time. I told her I didn't feel like myself in the relationship. I told her I cared about her, but I didn't think we were good for each other anymore. She listened, and then she said, very evenly, "You're going to regret this." Not, "I love you, let's fix it." Not, "I feel the same way, maybe you're right." Just that. Flat. Certain. "You're going to regret this." I drove home alone and sat in my car for a long time. Not because I doubted the decision, because I was already bracing for what came next. I just didn't know the shape of it yet. The first 2 weeks post-breakup were quiet. Eerily quiet. She didn't reach out. Neither did I. Mutual friends sent the standard, "Are you okay?" messages that you get when a long relationship ends. And I gave the standard, "Yeah." It was mutual, "I'm fine" replies that are only half lies. I threw myself into work. Slept badly. Reorganized my apartment the way you do when you're reclaiming a space from the memory of someone. Moved furniture. Bought new throw pillows. Deleted the photos from my phone in small batches, like pulling out stitches. That was week 1 and 2. Week 3 is when she posted. I found out through Owen. He texted me at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Just 4 words. "Bro, have you seen this?" No question mark. The kind of message that sits in your chest for a second before you open the link. I opened it. She had posted a thread. Long. Thoughtfully written. The kind of post that clearly took several drafts to get to a place that reads like it's spontaneous. It started with, "I don't usually talk about personal things here, but I think it's important to be honest with my community about why I've seemed off lately." And then it went into it. A relationship she'd just left. Unnamed, of course. Nameless. Just someone I trusted, and someone I gave 2 years to. The post described a relationship with a man who monitored her, who made her feel small, who isolated her from people she cared about, who controlled who she could and couldn't follow online, who went through her personal things, who dismissed her feelings consistently, who made her feel like she was too much any time she expressed emotion. And then, screenshots. 3 of them. I want to pause here and describe what those screenshots actually were, because this matters. The first one was a text exchange where I had, in fact, written, "I'd rather you didn't go to that event." That was the full message in the screenshot. She had cropped it cleanly above and below, so the only visible context was that single line. What the screenshot did not show was the 6 messages before it, where she had told me the event was being hosted by someone who had made sexual comments to her at a previous function, someone she herself had said made her uncomfortable, and I had said, "I'd rather you didn't go to that event," as a response to that, not as a demand, and then immediately followed it up with, "But obviously it's your call. I just don't trust that guy around you." None of that was in the screenshot. Just the one line. Clipped clean. The second screenshot was a message where I'd written, "Can we talk when you get home? I've been feeling really disconnected lately." That was framed in the post as me constantly pressuring her to emotionally perform for me. He always needed reassurance. Always pulled me back in when I was finally starting to breathe. The third screenshot was the most damaging. It was a message I'd sent during one of our worst arguments, month 20, I think, where I'd written, "I can't keep doing this. You go through my things and then act like I'm the paranoid one. That's not okay." In the post, she described that message as evidence of my explosive anger. She told her followers I sent that after she gently expressed she was feeling unloved. She told them she didn't know what she'd done to deserve that kind of reaction. She told them she'd cried for hours after receiving it. I read every word, every comment, all 462 of them in the first 12 hours. And I didn't type a single letter in response. Owen called me 20 minutes after the first text. Tell me you're going to say something. I said no. He was quiet for a moment. Then, people are sharing this. Someone commented tagging your job's Instagram. I said I knew. He said, this could actually hurt you. Professionally. I said I know. He said, so why aren't you? I said, because the truth is already in writing. And she knows that. He went quiet again. What does that mean? It means I have receipts too. And she knows I have them. And she's counting on me being angry enough to post them, so she can frame that as harassment. Another pause. So you're just going to let this sit? I'm going to let it breathe, I said. Give her room to talk. Let her feel like she won. Owen wasn't convinced. But he trusted me. He backed off. And I went back to sitting with the quiet. Let me tell you what it actually feels like to be publicly called something you're not. Not the dramatic version. The real one. It feels like walking into a room where everyone's already been briefed. Where conversations slightly shift when you enter them. Where people you've known for years give you this small, measured look. Not hostile, exactly, just careful. Where you start to second-guess your own memories. Not because you don't know the truth, but because when enough people repeat a version of events with enough confidence, the air itself starts to feel uncertain. I had 2 people unfollow me in the first week. People I considered friends. People who had my number and could have called. They didn't call. They just clicked unfollow and let that action speak for them. That hurt more than the post itself. Because a stranger's opinion can slide off you. But someone you've shared a meal with, someone you've laughed with, their quiet judgment follows you differently. I went to work. I answered my emails. I went to the gym. I did not post. I did not call her. I did not send a single message. Not because I didn't want to, but because I've always believed that the loudest response you can give to a lie is the sound of it collapsing under its own weight. You just have to wait. Here's what she didn't know. During those 24 months, I had journaled. Consistently. Not everything, but enough. I noted the date she went through my phone the first time. I noted the date she went through my laptop. I'd noted, in my own words and roughly time-stamped, the arguments where she threatened to leave unless I complied with something. I had the actual text exchanges, complete, unedited, uncropped, from every conversation she'd screenshotted. I had voicemails, 3 of them. One from month 14 where she told me she'd checked my location without my knowledge because I needed to know you were actually where you said you were. One from month 19 where she called me, crying, and said, I know I went through your stuff and it was wrong. I do this thing where I get scared and I need to know everything is okay. Her words, her voice. And one from month 21 where she left a message after an argument saying, I know I'm a lot. I know I'm not easy, but please don't give up on me. I had not shared any of this. I had not brought it up. I was carrying it quietly, the way you carry something heavy when you know that putting it down at the wrong time could do more damage than holding on to it. And she knew what I had. She knew, because during one of our last arguments before the breakup, I had told her plainly, I'm not going to keep having the same fight over and over where I'm the villain. I have proof of what actually happens in this relationship. She'd gone very still when I said that. Very quiet. And I think she believed, when she made that post, that I was too proud or too private to ever use it. She was right about the private part. She was wrong about everything else. 3 weeks after the post, something shifted. Not dramatically. Quietly. A girl in her comments, someone who'd been following her for over a year, wrote, Wait, I want to understand the screenshot better. What were you saying that he responded to with that message? What was the context? Polite. Specific. Not accusatory. Just curious. She replied to it. She said the context was that she had simply expressed she was feeling disconnected, and he responded with that. The girl replied again. Oh, okay. I just asked because I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship before, and the responses usually felt a little more targeted than that. I wanted to make sure I was reading this right. It should have ended there. But she replied a 3rd time. And this time, she made a mistake. She said, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, that the issue wasn't just one message. It was a pattern of him making her feel like she couldn't express emotion without him, making it about himself. And then she gave an example. A specific one. She said there had been a time when she'd cried to him about feeling overwhelmed, and instead of comforting her, he'd brought up old arguments and turned it into a blame session. That example, that specific anecdote, I had screenshots of that conversation. Because it had happened during month 20, and afterward, shaking, I had screenshotted the whole exchange because I knew I needed to remember it accurately. And in that exchange, she was the one who had brought up old arguments. She was the one who had said, and I quote directly because I can, Every time I'm struggling, you manage to remind me of something I did wrong. Said to me. In a conversation where I had spent 20 minutes trying to listen. I hadn't posted anything yet. But now I was watching a live performance of Revision, and people in the comments were applauding it. Then came week 5. Her friend, a woman named Qley who I genuinely liked and who'd been to our apartment a dozen times, posted a response video on her own small channel. Not about me specifically, just a general video about supporting friends through toxic relationships. But she mentioned details, very specific details, about a friend who'd finally left someone who constantly checked her phone and made her feel guilty for having friends. Owen sent it to me with, Qley. Really? Qley, who had once told me, sitting on my couch, laughing, that she wished she could find someone as patient as me. I saved the video link. I still didn't post. Month 2 after the breakup, I had rebuilt enough emotional distance that the whole thing felt more like watching a storm from indoors than standing in it. The shares had stopped. The commentary had quieted. Life was reasserting itself in the normal, forward-moving way that life does when you let it. I'd reconnected with Nate, who had never believed a word of it, and told me so plainly, which mattered more than he knows. Work was good. I was sleeping better. And then one Tuesday, completely unprompted, she posted again. A follow-up. She called it an update on my healing journey. In it, she talked about how she'd been seeing a therapist. Good. She talked about how she was learning to recognize the patterns she'd been conditioned into by the relationship. Fine. And then she said something that made me sit very straight in my chair. She said, one of the things I'm learning is that I was never allowed to have privacy in that relationship. He went through my personal messages on multiple occasions. I read that sentence 3 times. She went through my emails. She went through my phone twice that I caught, and I believe more times that I didn't. She left me a voicemail acknowledging it. And now, in a public post with her platform, she had flipped it. Completely. I am not a person who is easily shocked. But I sat back in my chair and felt something go very cold inside me. Not angry. Cold. The kind of cold that doesn't shout. The kind that just makes a decision. I didn't post that night. Or the next day. I sat with it for 72 hours. I talked to Nate. I talked to Owen. I called someone I trust more than almost anyone, an older colleague who'd once told me, the best thing you can do when someone tries to burn you down is let them hold the match. People always catch themselves eventually. He said, sounds like she just handed you the moment. He was right, but I still wanted to do it right. Not reactively, not messily. Here's what I did. On a Thursday evening, I made one post. No caption, no thread, no long explanation, just 4 screenshots. The first, the original text exchange she'd screenshotted, but complete this time. All 6 messages before the clipped one. Her telling me about the person who'd made her uncomfortable. My response in full context. The second, the voicemail transcription, word for word, where she said she knew it was wrong to check my location but did it because she needed to know. The third, the voicemail from month 19, where she said she went through my things and acknowledged it was wrong. The fourth, the complete text exchange from the argument she'd described in her comment, where her own messages showed exactly who had brought up old arguments. And underneath all 4 images, I wrote one sentence. I gave her the chance to let this go. She didn't. These are unedited. That was it. I put my phone face down on my desk and went to make dinner. I came back 40 minutes later. 214 notifications. I put the phone back down. Went to bed. By morning, something had happened that I genuinely hadn't fully predicted. The comments on her posts, the original ones, the ones full of support and fire emojis, and you deserve better, Queen, had changed. People had gone back. Some of the same accounts who'd left supportive comments were now leaving different ones. Not cruel, not pile-on, just questions. Wait, I saw the screenshots from the other side. Can you clarify the context on the first one? I'm confused. The full conversation looks different from what you described. I've been following you for 2 years, and I want to support you. But this doesn't match up. And then someone, I don't know who, I've never found out, shared the voicemail transcription in her comments. Just dropped it in. And the comment section shifted. Visibly. Noticeably. Even her most loyal followers were going quiet. Not attacking her. Just no longer defending her. Which, in the economy of public opinion, is its own verdict. She deleted the original post at some point that morning. I saw it was gone around 10 a.m. She didn't delete the follow-up. She didn't post an explanation. She just went quiet. Her platform went from daily posts to nothing for 11 days. When she came back, She posted about something completely unrelated, a product review, a travel destination, and didn't acknowledge any of it. Some of her followers welcomed her back warmly, because some people always will. But the comments had a different energy. The blind trust was gone. You can feel the absence of it even through a screen. I want to be honest about what the aftermath actually looked like, because I'm not going to pretend it was clean, or that everything was repaired, or that everyone who doubted me suddenly came around. Some people never revisited it. Two of the mutual friends who'd gone quiet stayed quiet. Not hostile, just done. And I've made peace with that. Because I think when you go quiet on someone in their worst moment without asking a single question, you've told them what they need to know about the friendship. There's a certain kind of clarity that painful situations deliver that you couldn't get any other way. Qley, who made the response video, she reached out 3 weeks later. Short message. I feel terrible. I didn't know the whole story. I should have asked you directly before I said anything. I thanked her. I didn't pretend it was fine, but I thanked her. Because that took something to admit that. And I don't believe in holding the ladder above people who are genuinely trying to climb back. Owen, steady from the beginning, bought me a beer and said, I knew it. Which is the most Owen thing that's ever been said. Here's the part one haven't told anyone until now. She texted me. About 6 weeks after my post. One message. No greeting. Just, I hope you're happy with what you did. I stared at that for a long time. There were about 30 things I could have said. I said nothing. Because what do you even say to that? She had constructed a public narrative, built it carefully, distributed it to tens of thousands of people, and then watched it unravel under the weight of her own inconsistencies. And her text was blaming me for the weight. I let it sit, unanswered, like I had let everything else sit. I think about that early period sometimes. The weeks where I was the villain in someone else's story, and I couldn't control the narrative, and I just had to sit in it. That's the part of the experience I'm most grateful for, in a strange way. Not because it was enjoyable. It wasn't. It was genuinely one of the harder things I've been through. But it taught me something about patience that I couldn't have learned any other way. We live in a moment where the first person to post wins. Where whoever gets the story out first frames the entire conversation. Where a screenshot without context is treated as a confession. And there's real pressure, social, psychological, almost primal, to respond immediately, to defend, to counterpost, to get your version out before theirs takes root. I felt that pressure. Every day of those weeks, I felt it. But I also knew that her platform was bigger than mine. I knew that if I had responded emotionally, defensively, in the heat of it, it would have looked exactly like what she was accusing me of. The control freak rattled. The toxic ex erupting. The red flag waving itself. So I waited. And when I finally responded, I responded with documents. Not emotion. Not narrative. Not character claims. Just, here is what actually happened, in writing, with timestamps. That's the only way it works. Evidence doesn't need explanation. It just needs light. There's one more piece to this that I want to include, because it's the part that actually helped me understand what had happened in that relationship, not just at the end, but throughout it. About 2 months after everything settled, I found an old message thread from month 11. We'd had an argument about something small, I don't even remember what, and afterward, I'd written her a long message, telling her I loved her, telling her I wanted to understand her better, telling her that when she went through my phone or dismissed my feelings, it hurt me in a specific and clear way, and I was asking, genuinely, for us to find a better way to communicate. It was a good message. Vulnerable. Specific. Kind. She had replied with 3 words, I hear you. And then the next morning, acted as if the message had never been sent. We never talked about it. I never brought it up again. And reading that exchange, over a year later, in a quiet apartment that finally felt like mine again, I realized something. I had spent 2 years trying to be understood by someone who had already decided who I was. And nothing I said or did or showed or proved was going to change that internal verdict. Because the story she needed me to fit, the difficult one, the controlling one, the one she'd eventually post about, wasn't written because of evidence. It was written before any of this happened. I was just cast in it. That understanding didn't make me angry. It made me sad for a moment. And then it made me feel very, very free. People ask me sometimes, friends, people who've heard some version of this, why I waited so long to post anything. Why I didn't respond the second she went live with those screenshots. And the answer is simple. I wasn't sure yet. Not of the facts. Of myself. I wanted to be certain that when I posted something, it was because it was right, not because I was hurt, or angry, or ego wounded. There's a difference between defending yourself and retaliating. And that difference lives in your motive. I waited until my motive was clear, until I wasn't posting to punish her, until I was posting because the record needed to be straight. And when that moment came, when she publicly and specifically claimed I had violated her privacy, when the inversion was too complete to let stand, I acted. Once, clearly, and then I stopped. That's the whole thing. That's the entire strategy. You can't out-narrative someone who's willing to lie with a smile, but you can out-document them, and you can outwait them, because the truth doesn't expire. It just waits. The last thing I'll say about her. I don't hate her. I genuinely don't. Hate requires ongoing energy, a sustained emotional lease you take out on someone you should be letting go of. I think she's someone who had learned, somewhere along the way, that she was most powerful when she was the victim, that people protected her when she performed suffering, that she could shape situations and people by controlling the narrative. She wasn't cartoonishly evil. She was something more ordinary than that. She was someone who didn't examine herself closely enough to see what she was doing. And that's common enough that it shouldn't be surprising. It just shouldn't be something you stay in. I got out. I survived the version of me she tried to publish. And I came out the other side with something I hadn't expected. A complete intolerance for doubt. Not arrogance. Just clarity. About who I am. About what I'll accept. About what silence can do that noise never can. I still have the journals. I still have the voicemails. I'll never post them anywhere else. There's no need. The story already landed. The comments already shifted. Her followers already did what I never could have made happen by screaming into the internet. They thought for themselves. And that, more than any screenshot or timestamp or transcript, that's the thing that actually mattered. She said I was controlling. She posted screenshots to prove it. She had 40,000 people nodding along. And I sat quietly in my apartment and waited. Because I knew something she didn't. You can't delete a voicemail that someone else already heard.